Cyrus, thank you so much for chatting with TechRaptor today. We're here to talk about Vampire Therapist, your new therapy game where you play as a vampire. To kick
Yeah,
things off, though, you yourself have quite a history in the games sphere already. So why don't you go ahead and tell me about that and your introduction to making a game?
sure. Yeah, it actually starts with the voiceover. I've been doing voices, and my favorite toy as a kid was my tape recorder, and I always wanted to be a voice actor. And that was not a thing that was acceptable where I was growing up in the culture that I was growing up in.
Hmm.
But sometime in my, I guess, late 20s, I got an ear infection. I thought I was losing my hearing, and I thought this is now the time to do this. So quit my job working in DC public advocacy stuff, which, we failed at everything anyway. So I moved out to California and I started doing voiceover work. And that actually was a really good introduction, not only to voice acting, but to games themselves. I have a background in writing and communication, and I've always enjoyed comedy specifically. And I had the chance to work with a lot of the developers that were hiring me to do voiceover because we would do a little improvisation, we would get into it, and then I came on as a full-time writer on a couple of projects. And after that, I moved out to Germany instead of Los Angeles to work at a game studio. Turned out that didn't agree with me either, so I started my own studio, and this is what brings us here.
That's fantastic to be able to follow that path all the way through. Um, and to end up working on Vampire Therapist as I believe a solo dev endeavor.
Yeah, yeah. I have it's me and a team of contractors for the most part. I have been doing all of the I've been doing all of the writing, most of the programming work, all of the design work. Yeah, generally running the whole thing, and it's been a lot, but it's been rewarding.
I mean, it's good to hear that it's rewarding, and hopefully, with the game releasing next month, it will continue to be rewarding.
Yes, yes. That I all I want to do is make more. I have a whole sequel planned that I had to write into the game already, so that will happen if the game does well.
Excellent. And so, for the game itself, explain in your words what is Vampire Therapist.
Yeah, so one of the nice things about the game is that I think it's in the title in every way possible. You are a vampire who is a therapist who is treating vampires who need therapy. And in doing so, you are learning therapy concepts and applying them directly. The whole point of the game was the idea that the problems that we have as humans are not new. They are quite old, and vampires were a great way to jump in and say, let's start working on the problems that we have had for thousands of years. But yeah, really the main gameplay is therapy. You will be learning concepts and applying them as the game goes on. And I wanted to make that fun and not boring. And so far, it looks like it's working. People are enjoying the game, and that makes me happy.
And how did you come up with the concept for this? What was like the inception point? Have you always had an interest in therapy, or?
Yeah, I've had a lot of therapy myself. It's been a rough go, but therapy has been helpful. I've mentioned this in a few interviews, but it's kind of funny. A lot of it comes from this scene in Twilight where Edward Cullen starts playing the piano and the camera is swooping over him and it's all dramatic and it's supposed to sound really great, but really it's just kind of doodly stuff, right? But we're supposed to be impressed because he's had 200 years to practice. But why should he be good? Just because he's had 200 years. And then that got me thinking, vampires that you see in media, they don't do a lot. They act sexy, they bite necks, they have their vampire societies, they kill each other, they kill humans. That's kind of it. But if you have forever, there's no reason why we couldn't send a vampire to Mars because they don't die. They can stay on that ship and even come back without being dead. We can send them to the far reaches of space. We could have them investigating, new medical breakthroughs. We could send them to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, and they are not going to die. So there is a lot that a vampire could do, and that is a lot of pressure on essentially a human being who lives forever. That's where the idea came from. And there's just so much to explore in that because I have all of history to draw from.
in all the promotional material, you highlight that you've worked on this with licensed therapists. What was
Yeah.
that like, finding or approaching mental health therapists to say, "Hey, can you read a script for a vampire game?"
Well, the thing is that in academia, people are actually really excited when you're doing something that brings ideas in the mainstream. I didn't only work with therapists, but also with historians on some of the characters that I worked on. And they want to make it work. That is a really good starting point. And they understand from the start that this is a game and that I chose vampires for a reason. So I can say, like, don't do this at home unless you are undead. Um, but they were really helpful in helping me think about how to do this properly. It made the writing much harder because I had to think in more clinical terms, and there were things that I learned that I didn't necessarily agree with. For instance, I can go into a little bit, but the whole idea of the game is that you are identifying cognitive distortions. These are ideas that we have in our heads that don't align with reality. We distort reality to go along with a societal expectation or our own expectation or anything. Like, we're not respecting reality. For instance, though, there is a concept in cognitive behavioral therapy where if a distortion is not negative, it's not considered a distortion. And I was thinking, like, oh, well, this doesn't work as well for my writing because I want to say that these positive unreal things are still unreal, but they don't count as distortions. And I respected that. I respected the clinical approach to it while, making my own jokes on top of it. So I can still put out my own viewpoints in this thing.
Gonna start a fight with the DSM, huh?
I'm ready. I'm always ready. This is how things get better, is we need to fight in order to make them better. And I have fought so much with the therapists, pardon me, with therapists, with my editors, with the historians on how do I do this right and how do I do this funny? Because it's a game. I want it to be fun and funny first before it's educational. And then the educational part will feel like rewarding.
Yeah, and in that, speaking with the editors and with the therapist, how different does that writing process look like compared to a normal writing room when you're having to get, fact checked, not just for spelling and
Mhm.
grammar, but for whole concepts?
Well, it means that going into writing, I have to have a particular setup for a session where I'm saying that every one of these distortions must be present because cognitive distortions are something we all do all the time, and we do all of them all the time. So I have to go into a session saying, okay, I have to write intentionally in order to make sure that I hit all of these distortions and make it seem natural. I mean, literally, I have a list open when I'm writing these things, and I'm checking them off as I'm going through that, oh, this is a disqualifying the positive, this is a should statement, this is a blaming, this is a mind reading, and I don't stop until I've got them all. But it's a different style of writing because I have to make sure that I'm writing with this intention and that I still have a plot and natural dialogue going. So I think a writer's room is nice in terms of coming up with overall plotting, but in terms of the actual writing work, it is very specific. The game part is a formula that I have to hit every time, or players will not feel as though they're getting the full therapy experience, especially later into the game when it gets more complicated and you have 13 distortions in the end. Originally when I was conceiving of this game, I talked to UI and UX people, and I'm like, oh, how do I get 13 buttons on the screen? And they just said, don't. So I had to take that into account. Now what I have is something that I'm actually really proud of. I haven't really seen how players have responded to it yet because this content isn't available to them. But after the first player sessions, you'll have access to a growing number of distortions, and you will pick which ones you want to use going into a session. Because if you have all of them, what you're going to be doing is basically harassing your clients all the time because they're doing them all the time. So you can't say, oh, I found you doing this one, I'm picking on you doing that one. Just pick 5, stick with those, and it's the player's choice which 5 there are, which is great for replayability because you can play through again choosing different distortions.
Yeah. So you had to filter in the 13 different ones, knowing that players would only ever be picking five at a time.
Yeah, yeah. So all of them must be present every single time, at least once.
And when people think of vampires, traditionally they think of, someone more akin to Andy, like the Transylvanian,
Yeah.
eloquent vampire. But instead, the main character is a cowboy vampire, Sam
Yep.
Walls. What made
Hmm.
you opt for a unique take on the vampire there?
Yeah, well, Andy was actually going to be the player character for a long time. I had written several scripts where he was the guy, and the clients were all coming out great, but Andy is very intelligent, very old. He has seen everything. He sucked the humor out of the room. It was just not working. Um, and in realizing that I'm doing a game where I'm teaching people these concepts, I can't have someone all knowing. You need somebody who's more of a blank slate. So I needed a character who was more, down home, more relatable, just kind of not intimidating as well. But there were historical reasons for having him involved as well. I started getting into reading uh, transcendentalist history and poetry. It was a movement in 19th century America where they were just talking about, okay, the church says we need this, and the government says that we need this. But what do we actually need? What is good for us as humans? And overwhelmingly, the answer was always being outside, appreciating nature, appreciating what you are and what the world is, and just going for a walk. So this was actually perfect for a roaming cowboy. I have him walk along America's national parks for 90 years. Because not only is it objectively beautiful, but it is something that would give a sense of appreciation for life, even though he is dead.
Can you give some of the early examples of, the style of vampire we'll see and maybe what they have going on in their life that you're trying to help them with?
Yeah, well, there are the first two characters in the game already that you may have met. Dr. Drain is, I center them around particular distortions. That's a good way of grounding them. So, Dr. Drain is a doctor who is trying to come up with a synthetic blood. He has been working on it for 400 years. He apprenticed under William Harvey, who mapped the circulatory system back in the 1600s, and he's just going at it and going at it and going at it, and is disappointed with himself for not making ultimate progress. The next character, Isabella, has a lot of family issues. This is based on the historical character of Isabella d'Este. And in a major Italian dynastic family during the Renaissance, it is full of extreme drama. As I read into this character, it just got deeper and deeper. I couldn't have come up with this myself. It's just, horrific the things that these families would do to each other back then. Yeah, I've got another character that is he was a child actor, so I'm delving into that stuff. And then another one with major internet issues, which I think we are all facing now, especially after Corona, seeing how not only does the internet take up a lot of our time, but with the rise of AI, it starts to control narratives. And I wanted to do a story that is about addressing that particular issue. So yeah, it's always come down to with each character, what's the punchline? What is the funny thing that I want to delve into and see how deep I can go.
Were there any special processes that you took pairing a cognitive distortion with a character? And it sounds like you're pulling from history and real life a lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There are definitely different approaches. There are a couple of characters that you'll meet in the game that you kind of need to modify your approach. With the child actor character, for instance, they are very self-centered. All of their distortions are less about themselves. Well, they're definitely about themselves too, but they're a lot about other people as well. So you kind of have to invert the way you use the cognitive distortions with them. And then there's a character that I don't want to spoil that is kind of another inverse usage of these terms. But yeah, yeah, it's been a fun challenge to make these terms universally applicable. But that's the nice thing about CBT is that it is well studied and it is broadly applied. So I had a chance to use it in this way.
For working with the voice actors for all of the different characters as well,
Yep.
was there a difference in approach you wanted to take, knowing that like there were certain elements of dialogue that may need to be more pronounced to
Hmm.
trigger things in the players?
Yeah, that was always a huge focus. As a voice actor myself, I had two main elements that I really wanted to capture. One is that I need really impeccable comic timing. I know I need actors who know exactly how long to wait before letting something drop. And I need the emotionality in there as well. These characters go to their darkest places. It is a comedy game through and through. But in the fourth act, you will see there are these revelations, there are breakdowns, and I needed them to go to those places. So I really needed actors who are able to have that kind of breadth. So casting was a very careful thing and done privately because I just I just knew I needed something special, and I aimed for those targets, and I got them. I think by strength of the roles that I was offering. I had to do like a lot of this myself, just because the writing process was so iterative and so intense that the script was constantly changing.
Yeah.
It's actually changing even now, which is not great because like I'm a month and 8 days from release. It'll get done one way or another, but thank goodness that I'm playing Andy and Sam because then I can just constantly re-record.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, we missed a distortion here, or this could be interpreted a different way. Yeah, thank goodness.
Outside of the core gameplay of therapy, there's also biting mini games and a lot of
Yeah.
the conversations that you have in in the bar with like
Mhm.
Reinhardt and Maxi. And I've got to ask, why is the game so horny?
Well, because it's vampires. It's vampires. You know, it comes with the territory. Ever since Interview with the Vampire, the impact that book and movie had on vampires cannot be undone. They will always be like this. I got a lot of inspiration not only from that, but from the Key and Peele sketch, where the sexy vampire sketch, where it's just a bunch of vampires acting sexy, and there's a new vampire who comes in, and he's like, "What are y'all doing? I mean, aren't we supposed to just like bite necks? Why do we have to wear leather? Well, like, why are you showing so much skin?" It The horniness is funny. That's why I lean into it. I start with what is funny. So and plus setting it above a goth club was a way of making it all consensual. Vampires drink consensual goth blood, and it means that there is kind of a horny environment below them at all times. So it all kind of works together. Yeah, it was pretty purposeful from the beginning.
And the demo has now been available for a bit and
Yeah.
going into Steam Next Fest as well.
Mhm.
What's some of the feedback that you've received so far from players?
It has been really wonderful to see. They have been resonating with Sam and Andy. They have been recognizing these distortions in themselves
Mm-hmm.
and, feeling seen in a positive way. I wanted to do the game that wasn't confrontational despite going into these deep issues. And it sounds like it's working. They're really into it and they feel the warmth in the writing. Of course, they let me know of all the bugs that I don't notice myself because I only use a mouse ever, and people are throwing their game pads at this thing, and I'm like, oh, why are you doing this? But it's okay. I'm getting everything sorted over time. But really, the response has been magnificent. I watched all the streams on Twitch, and seeing people laughing like riotously and their audiences going wild when some of the big punchlines hit. That is exactly what I was looking for. I come from like a theatrical background, so I always consider players an audience, even before I consider them players. So I think that viewpoint has been helpful to the game, at least for the game that I'm trying to make.
It was really cool to see how players, in the same way that like in the introduction, Sam was saying, "Oh, cowboy thinking," and people realizing, oh, that's why I do that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because again, we all do these things all the time. It's become a thing in my household where if I'm doing it or if my partner's doing it, we just go into the Sam voice. Well, that's disqualifying the positive right there. Well, that's a control fallacy. Well, you're labeling. Yeah. It's really good. It's taught me a lot about the awareness of these things. I've been in therapy for a long time, a
Mm-hmm.
really long time. And I've heard all these terms before, and I would listen to my therapist say them, and I would agree that, yes, I am doing this. Therapy ends, I promptly forget them. With this, having to apply it, now it is front of mind.
Oh man, I'm not sure whether that would be a that positive a thing or a potentially negative thing to have all of the clinical terms floating around.
Yeah, well, the point isn't to harass yourself. It's actually to give yourself more understanding.
Hmm.
It's not to beat yourself up with all these tools, but give you more awareness that, oh, I am doing this. Do I have to be doing this, or is this reasonable? It's a way of just stopping yourself a little short and saying, slow down and assess the situation. See if it's really what you feel it is right now.
While we and the players may not be vampires, what kind of lesson or understanding are you hoping that players will come away from Vampire Therapist when it's all said and done and credits roll?
uh, from the start, the idea has always been that we all, as humans, who live in civilization, who use the internet, who live the lives that we live, even wearing clothes, this is not normal. We all need therapy. We all need therapy in order to cope with this existence. And to think that we don't need it, that is the biggest distortion of all. Um, and so, really, I want to destigmatize therapy. That's really my approach here to say that if you are imperfect, that is normal and that is fine. And if you have difficulty coping with the world as it is, that is completely normal and completely fine. And getting help for it is equally completely fine. If you can afford it, but that's a whole other question.
Amazing. And so, it's impossible to cover absolutely everything in an interview, but I always like to ask, is there any like key nugget or aspect about the game that you're extremely excited about that you don't feel like you've had a chance to like really share and get into?
Yeah, two of them, I would say. One is the historical background of it. I went in deep on this. I went in deep into the transcendentalist stuff with Isabella d'Este in particular. I got to work with her chief historian, Deanna Shemek, who's working at the UC Davis, and there's this whole Isabella d'Este archive that she maintains. And we talked a lot about the character. We talked a lot about her family history, and she even gave me this incredible tidbit that her body is missing. Nobody knows where it went. She was supposed to be buried in a ruling city in Mantua, Italy. Gone, not there. Nobody knows where it went. So as far as we know, the story is based in reality.
She
So
she
that's
may be on
exciting.
top of some goth nightclub. We don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, that was amazing. The other historical character, Edmund Kean, he died on stage performing Othello, and I wanted to really dig into that as well in his particular family history. So the historical research part, I think, really makes a lot of these characters sing. The other thing that I've been paying attention to when people have been playing the game, and I'm a little like, why are they doing this? People want to get the right answer all the time. And going into this game, I wanted, again, the first part to be fun, low pressure. And I grew up with games in the point and click genre. So Monkey Island was what I was raised on. And the thing with those games is that if there was a funny answer, you would never get punished for clicking the funny answer. So when I have funny answers in the game, you never get punished for clicking them. You just get some funny dialogue. That's all. So I hope people will start clicking them, and I'm going to be thinking here in the next month of how I can start with one of the early choices and giving the player like clear permission to click a wrong answer.
Hmm.
Because there are some funny ones. Like if you talk to Dr. Drain and he asks, why you think he's there, and you're supposed to read his case file and you know why he's there, just do the funny answer and see what happens. You don't get punished for it. Like some of those are really good and nobody's clicking them. So I'll have to think about how to make those more appealing.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And so, just kind of to wrap up, where can people find more about you, and where can people find Vampire Therapist?
Well, they can find Vampire Therapist on Steam currently. It will also be on GOG when it releases on July 18th. All you have to do is look for Vampire on Steam. Right now, it's got some good traction, so it'll be the number 3 thing when you search for Vampire, which is super nice because Vampire Therapist starts with the same letters as Vampire the Masquerade. It's not, but you'll still be able to find it, which is nice. If you want to follow me and what I do, I have an x.com account for now. I hope it dies just like everyone else.
Yep.
But I'm Ahoy Me Hearties there. I have a Blue Sky, I think, on the same name. I'm really bad at social media. There's a whole reason I wrote a story about a character who is having difficulty with this because I have difficulty with it as well. My difficulty being that I hate it. So I've got a website as well, cyrusontheinternet.com, and which I haven't updated in ages. But yeah, just Vampire Therapist is the thing. Just follow that. Little Bat
Fantastic.
Games on Twitter, whatever else. Don't worry about me. The game is great. So play the game.
Yeah, go out, buy the game, play it, and then it sounds like you've already got a sequel planned. So,
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be good. There's a lot of surprises already in this game, and you'll see where the sequel is going as you play the game as well.
cool. Well, thank you so much again for taking the time to chat with TechRaptor.